Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to this week's Q&A. Looks like all the questions are on Patreon this time, so I'm just going to jump straight over to there, but feel free to support wherever's easiest for you. I really appreciate it wherever it comes from. So let's jump into them. First up, mystady.com asked what I'd recommend for a good external USB capture card. I use the Epiphan DVI to USB 3.0, and it's the one I showed in that video capture video I just posted, as well as I have listed in the section on the website. And the reason specifically that I use that one is because it could do 480p and 720p HDMI in the full RGB color space at 60 frames per second. It could also do 1080p 60, but then you get into compressed colors. So when you're talking about modern consoles, it's really not that big a deal. With retro, depending on what you're doing, it also might not be a big a deal, but remember, I'm doing it for things like video comparisons, so I really need perfect footage. I guess you said you're using the Elgato HD60 and the output isn't very sharp. I've heard good things about the Elgato, so I would just check all your settings. Maybe lower the OSSC to 720p, and then try using that, and make sure that I'm assuming you're using OBS or XSplit, so make sure that you're not stretching or smushing the window at all, because if you don't let the integer scale into your capture software, then you could definitely get softness. Even if all of your equipment is flawless, if you take a 1080p thing and stretch it a little bit, then it'll mess everything up. So I would check those settings, and if you're really looking for as good as you can get, that Epiphan in 480p and 720p is about as good as you could ask for. And then of course internally you could go with the DataPath or the Magewell cards. Marco Vizzini has a problem that many people have contacted me with. He's got more than 8 consoles, and each of them have cables ranging from LumaSync to Composite Video Sync to C-Sync. And he wants to put them all through one switch. So at that point, the Extron Crosspoint would seem like something like a good choice, except those require C-Sync on all of the inputs. So what do you do at that point? And it's kind of a weird predicament to be in, because it's either going to cost a lot of money or a lot of work. One option is definitely just getting all BNC cables from Retro Access. They're expensive, but I mean that it's justified because of what you're getting. And then that's it. You just took everything up to your Crosspoint and you're done. And the only console that you would have to worry about for C-Sync are, I guess, a PAL GameCube, which you could get cables with this sync stripper built in, and a PS2 or PS1 or 2, but you could do C-Sync mods on those as well. So if you wanted like the highest quality, what's the best solution to this problem? All BNC cables, a couple of console mods, and that's pretty extreme. The other side of it is you could just make a bunch of your own SCART to BNC adapters and include a sync stripper. And for the ones that don't have voltage on the cable, or maybe just make them all like this, just put like a USB port on the side and power it that way. And that's going to be kind of a pain in certain scenarios, so you might want to consider rewiring your console's cable, or putting the sync stripper in the console SCART head. But there's no easy way to solve this, except of course what you could do is buy a G-SCART switch, get one of the new ones, and also buy one of the older ones that maybe doesn't have sync regeneration, and use that as switch number 2. Plug that into switch number 1, and then leave the sync stripper off on switch 2, and have the brand new switch that has all of the new sync regeneration built in, have that working it. And now you could have 15 consoles, because remember, one input on the other switch would have to include the second one. So that's certainly an option. And if you don't need sync regeneration, if you just want to have something that works, just go on eBay and try to find 2 older model G-SCART switches. Especially, or even ask on any of the forums. There's a bunch of people that really need that sync regeneration. Certain model BVMs need it and stuff like that. So I'm sure they'd be willing to sell their G-SCART at a discount so that they can get their newer one, and everybody kind of wins. You could try the 16-port Hydra, but I've had a bunch of bad experiences with it. And it's not just me, it's friends that have owned it that have had weird things happen. So I don't know what it is. It could be freak things. I don't know. I just have an inherent distrust for the Hydra. I'm sorry, I'm sure that's offending somebody listening to this, but so those are really my suggestions. And you know, heck, if you're going into an RGB monitor, those are pretty robust. So if you're, maybe you could find a cheap Hydra somewhere and give that a try, and that way you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. But unfortunately, there's really there's no solution to this that's easy. I mean, I guess you could also go to the extreme of putting a sync stripper inside the crosspoint, but once again, there's no easy solution to this, so sorry. Kelly Greenidge was wondering if I owned a Parsec supergun or a Sentinel supergun, and if I was going to do a video on them in the future. So yes, definitely. And in fact, a few months ago, I didn't own any arcade hardware at all. And now, fast forward to today, and I have, of course, the HAS, which I love. I have a prototype of something that's coming soon. You guys, first quick glimpse. It's probably actually not going to look anything like that, so it was probably useless even showing it, but whatever. And somebody let me borrow a Parsec supergun. So I will be doing a video on it soon. I want to get a lot more research done, and I was having problems with the Parsec. I used it with the Neo Geo and was getting horizontal lines across the middle, and that same Neo Geo was working on all the other superguns I tried. So, and it was getting, I put it on the scope and it was getting extremely low voltage on sync. So I'm not really sure what's up. Maybe it's, you know, some of these expansions on there, but I haven't had any time to go farther. So hopefully I could contact the person who created this, Nick, low budget, and just see maybe I'm doing something wrong. But I'd like to get back to testing all of these for a video that really goes over why you might want to use one over the other. I have not personally used a Sentinel yet, but my buddy Beast owns one and he loves it. So I should be getting one eventually, and once I do, I'll kind of do a shootout and talk about the different features. I think the point of the Parsec was that instead of using a THS video amp, he uses a Sony, which allows it to break out into component video as well as S-video and composite, which is neat. I guess component video would be handy if you're going into something like a CRT, like your Sony CRT with a component video input. But for me personally, my opinion, I know most people might not agree, but if you're going to go through the trouble of using real arcade hardware instead of emulation, I'm going to want only RGB, or component, of course, but I would really only worry about an RGB output and then use a converter or something. So yeah, I have a ton of them here, which is kind of hilarious because I didn't have anything a few months ago. I even have the undammed adapters, which are also awesome. But I have a couple other videos I got to finish up first that are kind of time sensitive, and then I'll get to it. But I want to make sure to do enough research, and it's kind of like the video capture video. While it took a long time to create the section and the video, it took 10 times longer to do all the research to get to that point. So I don't want to be one of those YouTubers that plugs something in and says, hey, look, it works, without doing any real research on this, because arcade gaming is awesome, and there's so many little things that if you know, it makes the whole experience easier. So I want to get those right. Luckily, I'm surrounded by a bunch of very awesome people in the New York scene that are just absolute experts at this stuff. So hopefully I'll learn it as best I can and then put it into a video and a few pages on the site to help translate to everybody else. But at the moment, the Sentinel and the HAS seem to be the go-to. And I don't know about the Parsec yet. Once again, no disrespect to the creator, and there's an excellent chance that even I'm doing something wrong. But this one is, I'm not sure about this yet. So yeah, I guess that's a short sneak peek into the video, which will come sometime between now and never. And I'm really hoping to talk about that prototype one in a separate video of its own. So that'll be pretty interesting. But I guess, ask me if you need any questions answered immediately, ask again. And if not, if you just are waiting for a cool overview, there will be a video out. Clint Collage is planning on doing a full refurbish of a SNES Mini and wanted to know what mods I would suggest. He's thinking about doing a full recap, which that's one of those things where in most cases you don't need it now, but you will need it at some point. So, I agree with you in that if you really want to go nuts, you probably won't see like a video or audio quality increase But it's going to preserve the console, and who knows, maybe you'll eventually get a leaky cap that now you don't have to worry about, so good call. RGB mod with Voltar's board. Yep, Voltar and Bordy's boards are both amazing, so either are a good choice. C11 cap replacement, the ghosting fix. Absolutely. No doubt in my mind to do that one. Some people hold on to the original cap just in case. Whatever. I didn't. I threw mine right out. Replace the voltage regulator with the 7.8 SO5. Yep, I agree. Just remember my trick. Use some good isopropyl. Like I get this stuff, like the 99% stuff. I think that's what all the techs use. And then that Arctic Silver thermal paste. So I clean off the heat sink really, really good. I use, it usually takes a while because there's just some funk left on it. So I clean that off with the isopropyl, and I even take the new 7.8 SO5 and take like a Q-tip and clean that off just so there's no oils from my fingers or anything on that. And then I put some of that good thermal paste on there, bolt that to the heatsink. And my trick is I bolt it to the heatsink and I leave it just a little bit loose, and then I put the whole thing on the board, solder the 7.8 SO5 in place, and then tighten down the bolt. That way you don't have to worry about getting everything perfect when you put it back in. But I don't know if you would need to go to that distance for thermal paste and heat dissipation, but there's no chance of it, it'll only do good or nothing. There's no bad things could happen, so I would do that. The 470 microfarad cap on the voltage regulator, the white line fix. I don't think you need to do that at all, but there is another capacitor that you could replace. I did the video on it, so just search YouTube for retro RGB SNES ghosting or something. And on both the mini and the one chip, on the I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it explains it in the video. You basically just look for the cap right next to the regulator on the bottom side of the motherboard. You just use a multimeter to make sure which is which, and then you replace that one. And it's just another cap that's similar to the C11, just in a different place. And that, in place of adding that one on the actual regulator itself. And if Steve were here, he could lecture us as to why that's a better method, and just trust Steve in this one. Once again, that's another thing that the worst thing that could happen is nothing, which, never a bad thing. And dejitter mod if Video Game Perfection gets that back in soon. So there's a few things about that. I'll skip to your last question and then come back to this, but you saw a post on Twitter and a post on Shmups about a SNES RGB bypass with the dejitter included. The problem with that is you're always trying to keep the video lines as far away from the crystal oscillator as possible. That's the problem with a few models of the Sega Genesis, one model Neo Geo, and you want to keep that as far away or else you're going to get weird interference. So Dan hasn't had time to test his board yet. I don't know about the person on Shmups. I don't know if they've actually been able to make them yet. But I would, if you're looking to do this now, I wouldn't even bother with either of those boards. I would do it separate. But to address the dejitter mod, what that is a fix for the OSSC. So that's never a problem with the FrameMeister. It's not a problem if you go direct. And it's not even a problem on all displays. So first and foremost, I would ask yourself if you really needed it. Do you have that scenario, an OSSC into a TV that doesn't accept all modes, or a capture card? And it might even be something where you do all these mods first, then figure that out. So if you do decide that you need it, first and foremost, just keep in mind that it's a fix for the OSSC. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but, and I would do it separately for that same reason, for the, the whole keep the crystal oscillator away from the video lines. There were murmurs of other boards and other things getting integrated together, but, if you wait for what's coming next, you'll never get a product. And the things that we've mentioned up until that point are all things that are absolutely solid mods. So, I mean, Voltar's and Bordy's boards are amazing. Someday we might find a way to squeeze 0.1% more quality out of it, but I don't know if it would ever get past the quality that we're at now. So that, everything else you mentioned, I would confidently do, and I would just think again on the dejitter and only really do it if you need it. The people who predominantly do that are the streamers who already have all of their setups perfect. They have everything in play, and the only thing that ever gives them trouble is NES and SNES, and this fixes it. So that's just to add a little bit of perspective. I didn't do it on mine, and I have the new NES RGB board that has it built in, and if it didn't have it built in, I don't know that I would have bothered doing it. So I just hope that gives a little bit of perspective on it, and it's a fun project. You'll really enjoy it. And the caps, there aren't too many capacitors on the SNES, so that'll make it more of a fun project and less of like a, oh, here we go type of thing, like a Turbo Duo or something. Tony Phillips had a question about BVMs or PVMs, and he's a new supporter. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that very much. He wants to know what I would recommend for someone who's not concerned about cost, but is concerned about long activity if I want the best, and in the UK. So if cost isn't an issue, I'm not going to give you $1 million solution, don't worry, but if cost isn't an issue, the first thing I would recommend that you get is anything you have the opportunity to get. So if you stumble across a great BVM now, whatever, perfect. If you stumble across just a beat up old 14M2U or something, whatever you could stumble across, buy it immediately just to have. These things are getting, they're getting harder and harder to find, and I promise you'll eventually find a use for it. I still love my 14-inch PVM. The 8-inch ones I have next to my scope for testing, really just for a scenario in which I need to see that all the colors are working and that it's on, but I don't ever game on those. But the 14-inch, there's a million things I could do with it, and that even might end up being a video towards the end of the year too. So any PVM or BVM that you could come across, grab it. Even if it's one of the ones that has sync issues and you could really only use compositor S-Video for now, there's still going to be stuff you could do with it. So just having one's better than not having one. Now, to answer your direct question, you just need to decide if you need progressive scan or not. If you don't, I would look for the BVM F series, the 20F. If you do need it, you would want the D20s that do up to 1080i. And, they're 20, 24, and 32. Just have realistic expectations for the 24 and the 32. They're going up in price, but they're hard to find, and the 32 is near impossible to find. At this rate, there's only been 2 pop up a year. The prices are skyrocketing, and the scammers are out there too. There's been a few cases where people have contacted me about that, and even broken ones people were trying to charge ridiculous amounts of money for. So, if you're really looking for the best monitor of all time, find a D32 or even an A32 and the BKM68X card. But it's a lot of money, a lot of, good luck trying to get it. You're definitely going to run into a scammer at one point or another. But overall, finding a 20-inch BVM, doing a full recap on it, and having it calibrated is the way to get the best monitor out there, within the top 10 monitors ever made. Calibrated will make it look best, and the cap replacement, you can't calibrate without a cap replacement, and it'll extend the life of the monitor. So those are the things that you'd want to do for the one, your go-to, the monitor that you want to keep and use and want the best out of. A good realistic expectation is a 20-inch BVM. Have it serviced, full recap, calibrated. As long as the tube is good, then you pretty much would never have to worry at that point. The only other thing is Pat suggests good ventilation, so maybe add a fan in there or something too. But whatever, that would get you a monitor that would last a gamer a lifetime, because those things were designed for industrial use, 24/7 powered on. So unless you're a streamer that really is going all day every day, that thing will last the rest of your life with maybe one more service. But so that's my overall advice. I hope I wasn't too rambly and didn't confuse things. The short version, if you have the space and the cash, the first monitor you should buy is just the first one you find, because it's hard to find them. And then the best one, look for a BVM and expect to do a cap replacement and calibrate it yourself or have somebody else calibrate it. But those are, for longevity and perfection, you're always going to need capacitor work on a monitor, and potentially other things too. If a cap leaks, it could destroy a trace, and you might need trace repair, little things like that. As long as the tube itself doesn't have burn-in and looks good, that's all you would really need to worry about. So hope that was a good answer. And speaking of cap replacements, Happy Slappy Cow wanted suggestions on where to go if you want to get your PVM recapped. The problem is I don't think there are any shops that do this anymore, so you'd really have to go to forums and stuff and find people with a reputation. That's pretty much the best way, is make sure that technical people have verified that the person doing your recap has done it before. Skip the YouTuber phenomenon where somebody says, "Oh, well, that person did it and it worked, so they must be an expert." It's not just because something works doesn't mean it was done right. So just make sure whoever's doing it has a good reputation, somebody that shows pictures of their work. And it's always kind of like the rule of thumb where if somebody is proud to show the work that they've done, it's probably trustworthy. Where if people get snippy if you ask for pictures and stuff, it's probably because they're hiding stuff. Not in every scenario, just saying. For me personally, my friend Jose does my recaps. They're expensive because you need to understand that there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into this. So first, there are capacitor kits published online, but anytime you have a cap kit on something like DigiKey, for example, you then have to always deal with ones that are out of stock. Then you got to go hunt down the exact replacement. Some monitors don't have cap kits. So in a scenario in which there's either no kit available anywhere or no list available anywhere, or even one in which there is a list, but you want to double check and some parts might need to be refound because they're out of stock or something, you're talking about hours just to get that part of it taken care of. Then to take the monitor apart itself, if there is no cap list, then you have to go in. That's hours and hours to get every single component written down and then research to make sure you have the correct replacement. And then from that point, it takes forever. And whenever you do something like a full recap, every time you get a cap out, you have to look around and see, did it damage traces underneath? Is there more work that this needs? So the ones that I've seen that came out great took like a weekend. It's a lot of work. So I would just expect that it's not going to be cheap, but if you go through somebody that has a good reputation, it'll be worth it. And let me tell you, the first time I saw a fully recapped PVM, it was almost as shocking as the first time I saw a PVM. So my original 20M2U that a buddy of mine bought that I loved, I bought it from my friend Phil. I got it home, we plugged Super Nintendo into it, and Scott and I both went, whoa. And then I gave that to Jose. He spent quite a long time. He recapped the whole thing, made sure it was perfect, gave it back to me, and I went, whoa. I could not believe, little things like the alignment when you're running side to side in any kind of game like Sonic that scrolls fast. That was perfect. The colors were great. So it is worth it. It's just expensive. And a note to anybody who commented on that or to might be watching, I deleted 2 of the comments below only because I was making this live and it had your personal email address on it. I didn't delete the comment because of anything bad, so I'm really, if that was important, please re-comment, just don't put your email. I don't know if you could do direct messaging on Patreon, and if not, I think that's probably the safest thing to do, is just, because these comments don't go public until these videos go public. So you don't have to worry about posting, mostly you wouldn't have to worry about posting your email, and I would just delete it as I just did. Just better safe than sorry. But somebody even commented and said that they've already done recapping work and are in the area, so that's perfect. You have somebody with experience in your area. And to the GOAT, post pictures. I'd love to see how it came out, and if you have good camera equipment, which is, I know this is a royal pain in the ass, trust me, but if you have good camera equipment, maybe take a picture or a short video of the monitor beforehand and after with the same scene of the same game. Like I always use when you power on Sonic 1, after the title screen, it starts to play Green Hill Zone. Maybe do something like that so that you could really show it off and get people the true understanding of how much better it is afterwards. Or maybe it's hard to pick up in a YouTube video, who knows, but if you have the ability to do it, maybe give it a shot. Mark Pitos had a question about PCB Finish on arcade boards, and funny, I did not see this before the Retro Roundtable, but it was talked about, so maybe you messaged on the Retro Roundtable chat, and basically, game cartridges have hard gold beveled edges, and they're meant to be constantly plugged into a cart connector. Whereas things like arcade boards and even things like the side of a Genesis that plugs into a Sega CD doesn't have to be as durable because you might not unplug it or replug it as much. So the PCB finish might not be the highest quality. I know on some of these boards that I've seen, like I got my MV1B here, that's garbage. But how many times am I going to plug it in and out of a JAMA connector? So it's fine. It'll probably last forever. If you want more detail, check out the one from the 7th, so last night, where the guys go into detail on that one. But I pretty much summed it up into a short bit. But if you want more details, definitely listen to it. And, Renee and Steve, I think, are pretty detailed about it. Martin Lowe had a situation that I come across very often. So he got an RGB modded N64 very cheap, and then he opened it up and had questions about it. So first and foremost, whenever you've bought a modded console, a pre-modded console, or even if you've paid somebody to do the work for you, why not just open it up to double check? If the modder did a great job, they'll be happy that you got to admire their work, and if they did a crappy job, you'll get to see it, and then, maybe you'll learn something, or maybe they'll learn something, who knows. So good call opening it up. I'm going to skip to the end of your question. If there's any problems with the mod, could it damage your OSSC or PVM? Most likely not a PVM because they're built really well. However, if it's at the end of its life, you don't want a bad mod to be what kills it. And the OSSC, yes, if the voltages are sent wrong, and in fact, many dead OSSCs that are the result of overvoltage, usually on the sync line. To address your actual question, though, it seems strange because you said that when you opened it up, its RGB is wired to the multi-out without any amp. So it would work on a PVM that way. You'd have to turn the brightness all the way up, but it wouldn't work on an OSSC that way. So there's got to be an amp somewhere. You said you're using a Retro Gaming Cable's SCART head, but who knows what the previous owner did to that if the cable came with the console. Maybe they stuck the amp in the SCART head, which is terrible. You want the amp as close to the video source as possible. I've tested that too, and I believe we talked about it on a round table or something. But are you sure, and, excuse me, I don't know how knowledgeable you are or if you've done these mods before, but are you sure it wasn't one of the boards that slides over the multi-out? So it looks like there's only 3 wires connected, but the amp circuit is right there on the multi-out itself. Those became pretty common. I sold them for a little while. It was a boardy-based design. And if not, maybe look around, take the whole console apart and see if the amp is elsewhere. But either way, your situation sounds fishy. So I would just double check that you have a good mod installed in that you're using a proper cable. And, once again, if you bought a brand new Retro Gaming Cables, it's going to be fine, but if you bought it that somebody else had, who knows what that person may have done to it. So I would double check all of that and post pictures here if you need more info. Christian Meath said he's doing a USB GD-ROM install onto a Japanese Dreamcast VAO. I'm not even going to finish reading the question because I am so sorry. I know nothing about that. I've never seen one, I've never used one, and I don't even have much experience with any VAO. So I'm going to have to recommend that either maybe somebody could comment in these comments below and help you, or maybe check with a Dreamcast expert. I wish I knew more about the different model revisions, but the focus of my research since I started this was Super Nintendo and Genesis, and then it kind of trickled out from there. So Dreamcast, everything I know about the Dreamcast is in those 2 videos I posted. There isn't any other info. Whereas, Super Nintendo, Genesis, I could talk for hours about all the little weird things I've learned. So I'm really sorry I don't have any answer at all for you. I would just, go to wherever you've posted before, forums, Twitter, Discord, wherever. And, you could ask on the Retro RGB Discord. I'm sure there's people that have experience there, and see what other people have done and if they have any suggestions. So sorry that I'm useless about this one. Elmer M. said that he saw my stream at Brooklyn Video Games. I'll get back to that. And is looking to add a Neo Geo CD to his existing setup. He wants to know, should he pull the trigger on a standard or get the slightly faster CDZ for the faster loading times. My personal opinion is that the regular Neo Geo CD is fine. Some people disagree. Some people like to have the rarer console just because they're collectors as well as gamers. So keep all of that stuff into account. But if you just want to play Neo Geo CD games, I would just get whichever one works. And reach out to me, email me or private message me or something, because I think I know somebody selling one that already has the C-Sync mod done and all that. But, you know, that's one of those things, though, where the Neo Geo CD is great. I like the games. They're different than Neo Geo, but, you know, some of them are kind of toned down. But it's also kind of a cool collector's item. So how much of a fan of a Neo Geo are you? Do you want something that looks awesome on the shelf, you know, it's probably going to gain value, and you could play it, or do you just want to play the games? So I would take all that stuff into account. And you asked, have I tried retro gaming cables, pack-a-punch cables? Yeah, I've tried every single one of them. They're great. There's always the big cable debate. People go back and forth about whose cables are better, and the only point that I always make is just don't buy the crappy ones. Don't buy the $3 AliExpress ones or the $4 ones, unless there's a reason to. There's been a bunch of times I bought the cheap ones. Console 5 even sells them for, I think, like $5, because, you know, I needed a SNES connector, and hey, there's a free SCART head, but I basically just took those, threw the cable itself out, and then used the two ends, which buying it that way was cheaper than buying just the two connectors. So don't buy cheap cables, buy good ones, buy from any reputable reseller, and that's all you'd have to worry about. And about the Brooklyn Video Games thing, I had so much fun in that one. I sucked as a host. It was one of those things where I knew Kevin's schedule might be changing. My schedule's, insane and changing on a daily basis. So when we both found out that we could both meet there on a Wednesday and Brooklyn Video Games wasn't having an event, I just said, screw it, let's do this. Even though there was like a day's notice and less if you just watched the podcast and didn't see the tweet or the news post. And then when I got there, a bunch of awesome people showed up. We were having fun, and it was just one of those, I probably should have had the headset on and been on stream, but I was just enjoying myself, which is rarer than you'd think. Usually when I go down there, there's a ton of stuff that we have to work on, a bunch of projects, and this time we just got to hang out and play awesome games and have fun. So while it was a great time, I think I sucked as a host. So I'll do better next time, and hopefully you can make it to the next one. I think they're having a King of Fighters tournament, and while I'm not great at that game, I like going down to watch the tournament because people get all fired up. So if you have the ability to, definitely come down for the next one. Zachary Van Luling had a question about the Darksoft AES multi. He has an unmodded US AES console and was considering whether he should get a Yuna BIOS installed. So, in my opinion, this should be something based upon your main use for the console. I am a casual Neo Geo gamer, and the most of the time that I do use it, it ends up for video capture or something else. And everything that I've needed so far is available through either one of the multis, the Darksoft or the Neo SD. The one thing that I definitely need all the time is color bars and a solid white screen or something to do calibration. And you don't get that out of a stock AES or even an MVS. You could get a grid, but not full screen colors. So for me, though, having all that on a multi-cart, that's all I would need it for. But Jose, a friend of mine, I would consider him a Neo Geo expert. And he also works on the MVS as well as the AES stuff. And his perspective on this is always just get a Yuna BIOS. It might be something that you almost never use, but you'll be happy when you do. And he's somebody that's always inside of a Neo Geo, always doing some kind of work to it, always in the cabs, doing some kind of calibration. So I would just kind of take both of those perspectives and apply it to how you're going to be using it. If you really are just a casual Neo Geo gamer, you're not going to play carts from different regions. You're just going to, get the ROM cart and use that only. I think you should be fine. If there's any question on whether you might be messing with anything else, the Yuna BIOSes are pretty cheap, so maybe pick one of those up. And also, thank you very much for your support, and great first question. Schwink asked if I knew of any online stores or sellers that sell the Sega 32X shield clips that go into the Genesis cartridge slot. So no, I don't. I've seen them on eBay, but they usually sell for almost as much as a 32X, kind of ridiculous. And the second, are there any alternatives to remedy interference issues when playing Genesis games through the 32X using a Mega EverDrive? So that's kind of separate. What you'll find is that even with all the shielding, the 32X adds a lot of interference. It could just be a poorly routed board, because if you've ever opened one of those up, they're a mess. I can't believe the thing even works, let alone, that only has the interference that it has. It could be something where one of these days, if we figure out where the subcarrier is on the main chip, we could lift the color out of it. So essentially the same thing that we do on Genesis 1s that don't have a full bypass. Maybe that'll help. But my point is that I don't think adding those shield clips is going to do what you would hope. It might potentially help with interference, but I don't think that that's going to solve the problem. It might just help. And the shield clips like that, and things like why it wasn't officially supported on the 32X had to do with things like FCC rules and emission standards and things that may or may not affect video quality at all. So if anybody wants to let me borrow some, especially in the New York area where I could just drop it off and pick it up, I could do some testing to see how much of a difference that actually makes. But my guess on this, and it is a guess, even if you did find them, you're not going to really notice a difference in most cases, especially if you have something like a triple bypassed Genesis that's outputting a really clean signal. I think once you add that 32X into the mix, you'll really start to see all of its shortcomings. And it drives me crazy because I can't even really get a good 32X capture, so it's kind of a pain. Also, that being said though, if we do find that the shield clips make a difference, or if somebody just wants them, maybe somebody could do a modeling of it and we could have them made at a metal shop. Because that's one of those things where if you make one, it might be $30 or $40, but if you make 100, it might actually come out to like $3. So that's something, and I know a bunch of sellers that wouldn't mind stocking those. So if it's something that we find important, maybe we'll just have them made or something like that, depending on how complicated it is. So feel free to let me know. Maybe I could have access to one around here and do some basic testing just to prove this out and kind of go from there. Well, that's it for this week. For any new subscribers, please post any questions you have wherever you found that video. So be it in the subscription section of YouTube, Bitbacker, Subscribestar, Patreon, wherever. All I know is I usually try to turn off the comments on YouTube. Sometimes I forget and do it afterwards, but this really is focused on everybody who subscribes, because it's really just a small way of me saying thank you to all of you. And then about a month after it goes live to subscribers, it goes live on YouTube for everybody, just kind of as a courtesy and for fun. But this really is just a thank you to subscribers. So post wherever you found it. Also, just kind of the way things happen, I'm not able to go back and check any of the older posts. So please post whatever you have on the newest one available. And if I've missed your question, please re-ask. Sometimes I accidentally lose the section. Sometimes it comes in as I'm recording, so it didn't show up in time. But either way, if I missed it, just re-ask and I'll get to it next week. And as always, thank you so much for all your support, because none of the things could happen without your support. None of the behind of the scenes work, none of the testing, none of the videos, and of course the weekly podcast and Q&As. So thank you so much. I hope I'm making it all worthwhile, and I'm going to continue to try to post more content and do more things. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.